Part 1. The Hook and the Psychology of the Extreme. You arrive at Scout Sniper School carrying 60 pounds of equipment through Carolina humidity that feels like breathing through a wet towel. The attrition rate is a brutal 70%, and 7 out of 10 of you will break in darkness before the end. The instructors are already watching, evaluating, sorting the pool into categories you can't see, but they can. Potential, marginal, waste of time. Nobody tells you which category you're in. Nobody tells you anything except where to stand and when to move. The attrition rate is a brutal 70%. They mention this on the first morning like it's basic weather information, just another cold, hard fact about the unforgiving environment you've chosen to enter. 7 out of 10 of you will be gone before the end. Some will quit, some will be cut, and some will simply break inside in ways that become obvious only when it's too late. Welcome back to Shadow POV, your companion through the dark. Let's pause and look past the mud. What is actually happening to your brain right now? This extreme psychological pressure is a deliberate system designed to crush the human ego by withholding validation. Humans desperately crave feedback, but by denying it, the system forces your mind into a state of raw survival. This isn't just basic training, it's a psychological gateway. If this deep clinical breakdown of human limits under pressure fascinates you, hit that subscribe button now to join our tribe and support our journey into future hidden worlds. Stick around, because you need to see exactly what kind of person survives when the noise finally stops. Part 2. The Art of Invisibility and Hyper-Detail. Once your mind adapts to the isolation of selection, the true architecture of your new reality begins to surface through the sensory grit of survival. Your first week is stalking, not shooting, not ballistics. You learn the grueling discipline of moving across hostile terrain without being seen. You low crawl through endless fields where instructors with binoculars scan for the slightest tremor of movement. And if they catch a glimpse of your frame, you go back to the starting line to begin again. You build ghillie suits from raw burlap and local vegetations, systematically stripping away your human profile until you blend with the dirt, the tall grass, and the heavy shadows between the trees. You learn to move inches per hour when necessary, discovering that absolute patience is a weapon more valuable than any precision rifle. The sniper's greatest skill isn't shooting, it's becoming completely invisible. Around you, candidates drop out in clusters, broken by the sheer psychological weight of the monotony. One quits after a night exercise that left him hypothermic. Another simply doesn't show up for formations, his bunk stripped bare in the darkness. You stay because you refuse to imagine leaving. As your companion on this journey, I want you to look closely at this hyper-realistic immersion by forcing you to feel the insects exploring your motionless face and the mud caking into your skin. The narrative bypasses sterile logics. True mastery is never glamorous. It is an agonizing exercise in enduring the microscopic inconveniences that ordinary people flee from. Part 3. The physics of precision. But as your profile slowly vanishes into the terrain, the nature of the test shifts from physical endurance to cold, mathematical precision. The shooting comes later, and it is harder than you ever expected. You know rifles, you grew up hunting, putting rounds on target at distances that impress civilian ranges. But precision shooting at 1,000 yards is a different discipline entirely. Wind doesn't just push the bullet, it curves it in patterns that change second by second as it moves through pockets of air with different temperatures and densities. Gravity drops the round in parabolas that require strict calculation, not estimation. The fundamentals you thought you mastered are foundations you are still desperately building. The final exercise breaks candidates who made it through everything else. 4 days in the field with minimal supplies, completing stocks under evaluation, taking scores shot under intense pressure, operating on sleep measured in minutes rather than hours. Your body stops distinguishing between mud and skin. Your mind simplifies to the next task and nothing beyond. Instructors watch you for mental collapse as much as physical. Some perform perfectly until an internal governor fails under the accumulated stress. They're gone immediately, recognized as unsuited. The profession requires a specific psychology that can't be taught, only revealed. You survive because your mind quiets under pressure rather than racing. The chaos simplifies. You graduate in the bottom third of your class competent, ready to ship out. Part 4. Level 2. The external brain and the invisible burden. Graduating into a world where excellence is secondary to survival, you quickly realize that passing the test doesn't mean your trial is over. It simply earns you a front row seat to a quiet kind of madness. Welcome to Level 2, the spotter. Your team leader is a staff sergeant named Breus, a man with 4 combat deployments and heavy, distant eyes that never quite anchor themselves to the present moment. He carries the unseen weight of the lives he has taken, a quiet burden that becomes readable only after months of forced proximity. You start noticing the details. His subtle, micro-hesitation before crossing any open doorway, the defensive way he positions himself at the restaurants to scan every single entrance, and the haunting, wordless dreams that bleed through the thin barracks walls at night. As the junior member of this system, you don't pull the trigger, you spot. The shooter executes the final act, but you are responsible for everything else. Range estimation, fluid wind calls, positive target identification, and strict mission documentation. You become his external brain, filtering a chaotic universe of sensory data so he can focus entirely on trigger control, lung regulation, and the cold muscle memory required to put lead where it belongs. It's a profound lesson in collaboration, a reality where your personal ego is entirely swallowed by the unit. You learn to find satisfaction in the invisible labor, operating as the silent intellect that guides the fatal hand. Part 5. The first kill and the professional void. Surrendering your individual footprint to the technical demands of the team creates a strange insulation, but that intellectual detachment is violently tested the moment the abstraction of training collapses into a real, unscripted environment. Your first deployment is to a country you are not permitted to name, executing missions that officially do not happen. The rules of engagement are an ever-shifting labyrinth, changing weekly as the bureaucracy tries to sanitize the fluid nature of asymmetric warfare. The threat wears no uniform. They blend seamlessly into the daily rhythms of a local population until the exact second they choose not to. You're forced to look deeper, learning to decode hostility from the specific posture of a walk, the hidden placement of hands, and the tiny breaks in normalcy that occur right before violence emerges. Then comes your first critical engagement, a hostile positioning and RPG toward a vulnerable convoy route. Reyes takes the shot from 800 meters while you stabilize the optics, called the shifting wind, and watch through the glass as the kinetic energy arrives long before the sound. One moment the biological systems that make him alive are functioning, the next they simply stop. The weapon clatters on fire to the rooftop. You brace yourself for a surge of horror or a rush of triumph, but you feel an empty professional satisfaction, like a mechanic clearing a fault code. You file his face away into a dark mental compartment to protect your operational focus. Beside you, Reyes watches for the cracks that break new spotters, unaware that the fracture is merely buried out of sight. Part 6. Level 3. The heavy crown of the primary shooter. As the buried fractures within your mind silent deepen beneath the surface of technical precision. The steady passage of seasons guarantees that you cannot remain an observer forever. Over months, you learn things school didn't teach. You master how to read local atmospherics, the way morning air moves differently than afternoon air in specific terrain, and how to improvise positions when the perfect hindsight doesn't exist. You swallow frustration and disengage when the shot isn't there, realizing patience matters more than tactical score. You endure the empty downtime where letters from home arrive already obsolete, describing a world that continues entirely without you. You become an extension of Reyes, learning his patterns and his styles until your identity completely subsumes into the team. Then, the progression demands an upgrade. Level 3. The shooter. Reyes rotates home after his 5th deployment, taking a training command position that everyone knows is really about the visible drinking and the marriage that is already gone. You watch him leave with gratitude, relief, and grief for the version of him that existed before all those shots got trapped behind his eyes. His replacement is younger than you, a new staff sergeant, technically senior but practically dependent on your raw experience. The power dynamic inverts without a word. Your first shot as primary shooter is anticlimactic, as confirmed hostile at 600 meters. Steady wind, perfect conditions. The clinical mechanics work exactly as trained. Breath, pause, squeeze, watch the round arrive, and move. You are no longer providing data, you are the final executioner, inheriting the crown and the ghosts that come with it. Part 7. The Hostage Compound and the Art of Instinct. The technical satisfaction of an anticlimactic shot keeps your execution flawless, but it is the impossible engagements that force you to confront the cold reality of who you have truly become. There is a hidden compound nestled deep within a jagged valley where hostages are currently being held. The intelligence is concrete, heavily cross-verified by multiple deep assets and time-stamped within a matter of hours. 3 international aid workers, captured 2 harrowing weeks ago, are trapped inside by an extremist cell that has already uploaded its fair execution broadcast. The tactical window is incredibly small, the approach nearly suicidal, and the human stakes are absolute. You quietly set up your position 400 yards out farther than you have ever attempted to engage a target under chaotic combat conditions. The wind down there is deeply erratic, shifting direction every few minutes as unstable valley thermals create physical atmospheric chaos through the glass. You wait for agonizing hours, watching the guards rotate on strict, geometric patterns that your brain instinctively memorizes. The targets briefly stop at a predictable position, and you apply physical corrections that feel partly calculated and partly pure instinct. The science and the art of the tradecraft merge in ways your conscious mind can't even explain. The trigger breaks clean, the round flies true, and the hostages are saved. For the first time, your burden isn't measured by a body dropped, but by lives preserved, redistributing the silent weight you carry. Part 8, Level 4 and 5. Creating monsters and the friction of peace. When your reality shifts from destroying high-value threats to preserving innocent lives, and you realize the hardest part of the tradecraft isn't the physical danger, but surviving the suffocating quiet that follows an operational success. You return to the schoolhouse that made you. Stepping into level 4, the instructor. Now you stand where your instructors once stood, evaluating young candidates who remind you exactly of yourself 8 years ago, staring into a continuous institutional cycle that outlives any individual career. Teaching forces attenhan, analytical breakdown of your own muscle memory, explaining. The mechanics exposes the raw principles beneath the procedures. You watch candidates break against the monotony, learning to predict who will persist. It is never the naturally talented or the physically strongest. It is the rare individuals who treat failure as pure data rather than a final verdict, adjusting their variables instead of repeating fatal errors. Yet, managing paperwork and administrative routines slowly dulls your edge, creating an uncomfortable friction. You crave the absolute cognitive clarity that only combat environments can provide, and when the system offers one more deployment, you instantly take it. Level 5, the team leader. You deploy to an unacknowledged regional stability operation with a team of younger faces whose cultural references you don't share. Tracking high-value assets far from civilian oversight, your aging body registers every hour spent in frozen, uncomfortable positions. But your compiled experience allows you to master the chaos. You execute a legendary one. 700-meter shot through shifting valley winds, parading under a tiny window measured in seconds. The unit inflates the shot into myth, but your seasoned intellect understands the gritty realism behind the prey. So you survive because a random breeze cooperated at the critical millisecond, proving that at the absolute peak of the progression, the line between victory and catastrophe belongs entirely to physics. Part 9. The anatomy of a critical mistake. But when physics cooperates on a legendary assignment, it blinds you to the terrifying reality that the mechanics of the system are ultimately vulnerable to the imperfections of human data. The shot that matters more is the one nobody talks about, a catastrophic, unacknowledged mistake. You are assigned a target, cross-verified by regional intelligence briefs, and your mechanical execution is absolutely flawless. Breath held, pressure stabilized. The trigger breaks clean, but the data was bad. The outcome is a dead civilian standing in a restricted perimeter, performing routine, ordinary movements that looked threatening through high magnification optics but weren't. The institutional reports quickly cleaned the narrative, filing it away under the sanitized vocabulary of collateral damage. But inside your mind, away from the administrative buffer, the word is murder. You stop sleeping. The faces of combat hostiles accumulate in your memory, But this specific phase refuses to sit quietly in a dark mental compartment. The rules of engagement cleared your action. The official review board cleared your file, but the system cannot clear your humanity. And the ghost keeps visiting. You learn to carry this suffocating load because refusing to feel the horror means transforming into a machine, something far worse than a broken soldier. The operators who navigate this darkness without feeling anything scare you far more than those who carry the grief. At least the agonizing pain proves your internal conscience is still functioning. Part 10. Level 6. The Master and the Unbalanced Mat. Carrying the silent weight of a flawed system inside your chest. You enter the final tier of this progression where time and survival ultimately grant you an unacknowledged title. Level 6. The Master. You are rare now, a shooter who didn't burn out or break under the mathematical certainty of incoming fire. Younger faces seek your insight because you know things their manuals omit. You test automated ballistics and environmental tech meant to eliminate human error. But your internal logic understands that algorithms lack conscience. Your final deployment is routine, ending with an unremarkable medium-distance shot. You only realize it's over on the transport home. 22 years, hundreds of operations, and numbers. You stop counting because counting feels wrong. You return to a quiet life, but you can't unknow what you know. Your biology is permanently altered. Hypervigilance remains a baseline as you scan grocery store entrances. The mat of this tradecraft will never balance. You saved lives, but the ghosts remain as your companion on this journey. I leave you with this. When you spend a lifetime becoming completely invisible to survive, how do you find the courage to let yourself be seen again? Following the meticulous structural deconstruction of the channel's psychological core, we can finalize our analysis of this progression system. The DNA of this hyper-realistic simulation reveals that true narrative immersion does not rely on sterile, objective data or generic, loud action. Instead, it functions as a highly specific psychological mirror. By anchoring the listener in the tense vulnerability of the second-person perspective, the narrative forces us to confront the structural limits of human performance, the invisible weight of professional execution, and the hidden mental casualties of specialized traits. True mastery is ultimately revealed not as an accumulation of unfeeling mechanical efficiency, but as an ongoing internal struggle to keep our core humanity bounded by conscience while operating in environments designed to tear it away. The deep lesson we must draw from this evolution is that performance and character are entirely separate systems. In our real day-to-day lives, we are often encouraged to advance through career levels, to specialize our tradecraft, and to optimize our output. However, the progression model teaches us that technical advancement without deliberate, active emotional management will eventually compromise your human operating system. To apply this insight effectively today, you must intentionally compartmentalize stress without completely disconnecting from your feelings. Treat your daily failures as neutral data to be processed, rather than permanent moral verdicts on your capabilities. Most importantly, recognize that real success is never just about accumulating titles or maximizing an output. It is about preserving your core internal conscience intact so that when your daily mission is over, You can step out of the shadows and safely let yourself be seen by the people who matter most. Which of the 6 levels in this journey did you find to be the most intense or eye-opening? Please share your perspective in the comments section below so we can discuss it together. And don't forget to subscribe to Shadow POV to support our channel as we prepare more deep stories for you